Oh, hi. It's been a while since we actually did a stream, but yeah, we something happened that we can't not talk about. So, if you recall, like the day yesterday or the day before, I'm not very clear on which ones because I'm nocturnal and what day it is tends to be very unclear for me. What ended up happening is that I released a video about what the new counterculture is, and I like to think I was pretty clear that the new counterculture is the torrenters, the pirates, the software crackers, and just generally people who go get the software they want, the music, the videos, the video games that they want for free. And this is going to have tremendous socio-political implications that are going to be significantly larger than simply whether or not you're going to be able to watch the next episode of Harley Quinn without subscribing to some unnecessarily expensive streaming service. That it's going to have massive implications for whether or not we're even going to have a state, and most importantly, that the people participating in it don't need to be ideological anarchists, don't need to be ideological agorists. And yes, I said the word, Mr. Dapperton. What's going to end up, this is going to just generally trigger a massive revolution significantly larger than what's already happening. And for some reason, Mr. Dapperton felt the need, I have a feeling he was put up to it, to respond to it. And in so doing, he somehow managed to completely misinterpret my or what I said. Now, this could be my fault in a sense. I may have needed to be a bit more clear on certain points. I honestly don't believe so, but I could be wrong. I mean, I like to think I was pretty clear, wasn't I?
Yeah, you were pretty clear, but I think part of it might have been that the beginning of your essay was making the point of characterizing certain musical genres or trends in the past which have been attacked by the media or have been used in a political sense by the state in order to as an example of a counterculture that was actually politically unsafe. And the second part of your essay, correct me if I'm wrong, because I watched your video and that wasn't in the original draft of the script that you sent. But the second part of that essay was inspired by sort of my notes on your argument, which was that genuine countercultures, which are actually politically unsafe, don't tend to really get any attention or any representation at all, and if they do, the true ideas are never genuinely represented. They're mischaracterized or they're attacked as being associated with terrorists or thieves, uh, or the state will try and co-opt them by, of course, misrepresenting the principles or praxis that make up the action in order to try and associate it with some sort of politically safe affiliation which they can control and exploit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that might have been part of it, but that's actually, I think, the point that you were making, at least if I'm understanding it correctly, is that agorism and the praxis of counter economics is a true counterculture, and it always sort of has been, but that's especially the case now because, for one, I'd say most of society is leaning towards it as a sort of proclivity. It's becoming more beneficial for more people to associate in subversive manners that undermine the state or its political institutions that it tries to get people to associate with to benefit itself, like
Mm-hmm.
Walmart, for instance, or these banks.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. The thing is that the cost of subverting the state and engaging in counter economics is diminishing, and it's rapidly diminishing day by day. I mean,
No,
nowadays it's like someone actually asked me to try to find them a less than legally acquired free copy of an unspecified piece of software. It took me like 5 minutes.
Yeah, not only is the cost going down, but because more people are using it, more people are investing their time and resources in ways to make it more profitable and more consistent to trade around these networks and around an infrastructure based on the expectation that people can associate in a self-employed free manner, which is less capital intensive and more peer-to-peer, so to speak.
Hmm. Now, yeah, basically we started a stream to reply to Mr. Dapperton's reply to my video. And we have that queued up. Give me a second here to hopefully I can get this right.
Are we going to to mention what happened in response in the comment section?
Later.
Uh,
Later.
all right, because
Oh my god.
before the stream, you were telling me all about it, and you seem really excited to get to that.
I'm honestly saving the best for last. I am very excited. Also, Pumpkin Row donated $3.97.
Oh,
Thank you very
nice.
much. Let me just pull up what he said. You guys are the best anarchist bromance. Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I have no issue with that.
I'm that is not a controversial statement. So let me just get this screen share set up. Hopefully this works. Yep, that works. All right. Can you see my thing okay?
Yep, I could see it.
All right.
Why don't you try playing it a little bit so that I can test whether or not we'll get feedback from
Okay.
my mic so that we can hear it.
Let me see that. Yeah, we're good. Oh. Freaking I don't hear it.
Well, there's no audio coming from your. Okay, hold on.
Oh, there it goes.
All right.
Yeah, there's a little music thing.
Oh my god. Yeah, I hadn't seen his new intro until this video, but he's going for a style that doesn't fit his presentation in his videos. The intro suggests like Dr. Layman or Philosophy Tube. Not necessarily that type of argument or that type of philosophy, but that style of presentation. Like someone's going to be citing books or someone's going to be citing specific footnotes within academic texts, and they're going to be talking about the technical debate between how one even reaches a conclusion within a specific overarching philosophical group. But that then you actually click on Dapperton's videos, and I kind of I was gonna respond. I was a little tempted a couple days ago to respond to a video like back and forth he made between himself and somebody called Guerrilla Radio, formerly known as Dark Scythe, which they responded to Dapperton making a video claiming that like Trump is the counterculture, or he's anti-establishment, the establishment's against Trump. Mega
Yeah, sure.
and the other guy's like, no, the establishment's against Bernie. And the reason I brought that up is just because the intellectual depth to a lot of the arguments Dapperton makes, it's really on par with like listening to a middle schooler argue for who the best Smash main is. Which, by the way, it's Lucas, and I will fight anyone on the side of the street who claims otherwise.
I mean, I haven't played Smash in a long ass time, so I can't say one way or another, and I definitely couldn't say who the best Smash Ultimate main is, though I would very much be excited to try out Ridley. Now, with this in mind, yeah, I think everything you said about the intro is pretty accurate to what I was thinking. It's meant to project something that's overly classy, something that's academic, when in fact I think you remember his old intro with that was ridiculously metal or that was unnecessarily edgy and metal where he would just straight up murder communists and Nazis. That was more accurate to what his style of content is because his real thing is just to own the libs. It's basically he took SJW's Get Owned compilations and made that into his style of commentary. And that's really what he's best at. That's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It's not a criticism. It's just an observation that his current intro, yeah, it's just not fitting to his content. So I'm just going to go ahead and...
That seems to be more fitting of like his style of argumentation because I mean like when it comes to his arguments they're just really weak and that's not something that is particularly new. I've gone back and watched like even some of my older videos and even back then you can see some of the problems today, like assuming that the libertarian praxis is shrinking the state, or to assume that an ethical argument, that within ethical philosophy, something could be like seen on scale. So something could be more or less ethical based on a scale, as opposed to individual acts of aggression just being individual actions, and there's not really such thing as something being more or less criminal. Something's criminal, it is. Something isn't, it isn't.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hold on a second. Is this thing still up? Yes, it is. Why is that the case?
Oh god, we're getting a lot of comments.
Yeah, this thing seems to be pretty hot. How do I get rid of this thing?
Also, yeah, not to mention though, people are pointing out in the comments here, they're talking about like his current support of the state. You're in Brazil now, Bunny.
Yeah, I mean, you haven't heard him in the voice chats?
No,
he's been in Brazil.
He seems to just be bouncing around everywhere.
Well, that's good, but anyways, yeah. Thank you for the $5, Riley. Now I just need to figure out how to
because of how big the counter economist scene in South America is right now. It seems like that would be a pretty great place to be right now, admittedly. So
yeah. Now let me turn screen share back on. All right, there we go. Now let's get started with the video, because otherwise, at this rate, we'll never start the video.
Okay, I'll mention it after, I guess, or around the time we mention the comments.
Yeah. It seems a little long, doesn't it?
The intro is not too long.
Ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to talk about a filthy heretic video. Yes, he's a libertarian like me. And yes, I agree with him on most things, but I think in this video he reaches a little bit. So I really appreciate having this opportunity to explain what I disagree with him on. Let's start the video and dive in, shall we? Also, before the video starts, I want to point out that Filthy Heretic sounds like Sir Hiss from Robin Hood. Kind of funny.
What?
Sire, you have an absolute skill for encouraging contributions from the poor.
He keeps hissing when he talks.
Now, think historically. Every 1 or 2 decades, there is a major counterculture that emerges, demonized by moral guardians and priests of sadism alike as being degenerate, subversive, or any number of nasty-sounding adjectives.
Sire, did you see what they stop hissing in my ear?
They're often portrayed as naive.
You sound nothing like that.
I mean, his point is that in my videos, I tend to have an exaggerated s sound, which, I mean, it's true, I do, but, I mean, it's not really criticism. I mean, I know it's just an observation, and it's not really anything, but yeah.
That's petty as fuck. What kind of Mean Girls bullshit is that?
I have no freaking idea.
I thought at first it was just like, oh, Dapperton, this guy is a snake and you're a lizard, so you can make that comparison, but no. Okay, he's just being petty. I mean, that works too.
I actually can't tell if it's just something I normally do as a result of my accent, and no, I couldn't tell you what accent that is, or if it's just the way that my audio gets edited. Because, I mean, I do edit my audio. I do adds a whole bunch of things to make me sound a lot more crisp and a lot more clean than I usually do right now, even though the microphone that I'm using right now is literally the same microphone I use for my videos. But yeah, I don't know how to fix that. I wouldn't know how to fix that. And quite frankly, I'm not terribly motivated to try and fix it.
You
So
sound
as far as-
fine. Don't worry about it.
I'm not going to be worried about it. In fact, I got a lot of positive comments in the Discord channel when we were discussing it earlier that a lot of people actually like it. But anyways, yeah, let's keep going.
Constructs of government, charges of victimizing other people, including themselves, are often levied against them. The Israeli government's appointed moral guardians banned the Beatles from performing in their country, according to Resolution 691. I'm getting a little off topic here. The point is that mainstream culture and the powers that be are usually quite antagonistic to the counterculture. Most countercultures have a musical genre associated with them, one that eventually becomes mainstream. Fans of certain types of music grow older and gain levels of power themselves. Record labels realize it's profitable to sign on these musicians and market to young people, making what was once a horrific blight upon taste and moral sensibilities becomes normal. Then, eventually, it becomes a music anachronism. Where are the new breakout genres of music? Well, what are people's favorite genres of music nowadays? Some people like punk, some people like jazz, some people like symphonic metal. And you, dear viewer, have your own favorite genre. Feel free to fill it in. But then I realized I was thinking about it all wrong. Then it hit me.
Conservatism is the new counterculture.
Conservatism isn't a counterculture whatsoever.
So, in your opinion, Filthy, music is
I've got to just pause there real quick because I did notice that he clipped a lot of my video and then made random jump cuts. I'm not sure why. Maybe he was just trying to save time on the video so that his video wasn't just an entire replay of mine, but I do get the sense that it takes a lot of what I said out of context and completely misses a lot of the argumentation and reasoning that would normally fill in those gaps.
No, because he almost plays nothing from the second half of your video, and he tries to represent your argument as making the case that state media tends to just overtly attack establishment, or not establishment, but
Conservative?
countercultural groups, what you're characterizing as countercultural groups or countercultural movements.
counterculture, or conservatism isn't. Because conservatism bleeds at a small state, and you, filthy heretic, want zero state. So, in your opinion,
I'm sorry, what? I don't.
What? Oh God. Oh man.
I mean, I was pretty clear on what my criteria is for counterculture very early on in the video, and not once did I say a counterculture has to be for a small state or a no state.
Has to be associated with politics at all.
I mean, I was thinking about this before when I was replying in a comment to this video, but what were the politics of jazz? Or was that just music that people enjoyed?
Well, I mean, there are certain common themes promoted by the music, and
Yeah, there are.
I don't know much about the jazz movement, admittedly, but I can tell you that, blues originally was demonized, and blues was demonized because a lot of the songs promoted a sort of self-sufficiency narrative. The punk music, the punk theme, the punk movement was demonized pretty heavily, and the common themed punk music was whatever was just anti-conformity, which is just a relative concept that anybody could apply to themselves based upon whatever they think conformity is, much less whatever they think a culture is or an establishment is, which is my second point that I'd like to get onto, which is he uses a lot of these terms with very ambiguous conceptual meaning, in a way that where they could be interpreted in a series of different ways. Establishment would be sort of the first example of that. Establishment is a bit of an anti-concept, but it's not necessarily an anti-concept as much as it is. It's designed to imply that whatever's wrong in society is just a group of individuals conspiring together for their own individual interests, and that obfuscates any criticism of the state or what one interprets to be any sort of system that's causing problems in society, whether it's the state, whether it's banking, whether it's international organizations. And then we can get on to conservatism. Well, what type of conservatism are you referring to, and in what context are you referring to conservatism? Social conservatism? Because social conservatism cannot be a countercultural movement by definition.
It's and I make this point in my video explicitly that conservatism, it reinforces the mainstream cultural norms. What defines a counterculture is that its cultural norms are going to be directly different to, and most oftentimes oppositional to, mainstream culture. Whereas especially social conservatism, and by conservatism I interpret that to mean the kind of Burkean conservatism, like the political conservatism, which of course is very socially conservative, but it reinforces mainstream culture, very much so. You ask any person who self-identifies as a conservative, chances are they're going to be highly in support of a national defense, in support of cultural patriotism, in support of nationalist ideas.
Well, even if we were to get past the fact that if we're going to talk about politicians, all politicians have a sort of uniform interest, and that's to work towards goals which they see as being in the interests of the state. And their view of what the state's interests are of course very uniform.
Now, so, hold that thought, because it's going to be useful to elaborate on a little bit further.
Okay, well, I was going to say, and it's not really an expansion upon that thought, but another point I was going to make is just, aside from the fact that you can't really have a political movement, by which I see, by political I mean a movement or an affiliation which explicitly sees state policy as a tool to achieve its ends. You cannot have a political movement which fundamentally is competing with the state, which is a big part of the reason why conservatives have political conservatives, so to speak. Their history is not even really small government, whatever that means. I have an entire video explaining how that concept is flawed, the idea that states exist on a scale. But
let's continue with the video.
Well, all I was going to say is the history of conservative politicians is just at most fist-dooming, protectionist, extremely statist policies, while claiming that they're pursuing free market ends.
All right.
Jesus Christ, the chat is blowing up.
I mean, we got like last I checked, 34 viewers. Now why isn't this thing working? It's not responding. That's not good. Really, right now?
Nice.
That's not good.
Oh, this is great.
Then it hit.
Was it playing on your end or?
No, it's like starting and stopping.
Conservatism is the new counter.
Are we synced up now or?
Not at all. Actually, you're like way behind me. I'm actually going to try to reload this. So let me just turn off. Freaking hell. All right, good. You're still in the room.
Potato computer gang.
It's not even our computer. It's the site.
Paul Joseph Stalin. Yeah.
That's true.
Country music is a conservative culture.
I mean, country music historically and modern times reinforces mainstream narratives. If anything, like the best you could say about country music is that it was a counterculture to things like rock and roll.
It's the counterculture.
All right, there we go. We're synced. Let me just turn off my audio.
Yeah, Hoppy and Killer figured this stream was gonna piss people off, so what the hell? Why care about trying to fucking appease sensibilities?
All right, there we go.
No, conservatism isn't as extreme or as effective as anarchism at battling liberalism, but it's still a counterculture, believe it or not. In fact, the reason why conservatism works so well as a counterculture is because it's not as scary or as extreme sounding as anarchism, so people will adopt it, actually. Yes, I know it's technically more extreme as it uses more violence and force than anarchism, whereas anarchism uses none. But most people don't know or even think about that. To most, conservatism is less scary to adopt as that scary-ass term anarchism. Most people think that word means chaos, and they obviously don't think chaos is a good ideology, so they will never adopt it. So for that reason right now, conservatism is the most popular counterculture on the planet right now.
So is he telling me that jazz in its time wasn't scary, that hip-hop wasn't scary, that punk rock and that whole anti-conformist counterculture wasn't scary to people?
Well, it's
People
not
don't adopt it because it's not scary. They adopt it because they like it. They like the trappings associated with it. They like the message or the feelings associated with it, like the anti-conformist message of the punk rock movement as mentioned earlier. People aren't going to become ideological anarchists because they find it to be terribly persuasive, at least not most of the time. They're going to be, well, torrenters. They're going to be software pirates because it's more profitable for them to do so. It really has nothing to do with ideology. This is why I put so little emphasis on my video as I did about politics, because fundamentally this whole thing is anti-political. Though the best you could say about it is that it's mega political. It's bigger than any one philosophy or another. It's fundamentally the relationship between economics and violence.
And just what were you gonna say? Sorry.
I was just finished what I was saying.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't have anything to add.
Okay, well, let's continue.
Not saying it's the best. I'm saying it's the most popular. Now I could already see it. Filthy Heretic's going to fire back and say that conservatism.
Well, can we
isn't
pause
real
for a
country.
second? I just as it pertains to anarchy, I don't really think that it's people believe that it means chaos. It's that they don't understand how society would operate because they've been brainwashed by public school into thinking that in order to have any sort of rights, you need to have a rule of law. You need to have state imposing legislative fiat onto people. And that's a very easy concept to refute, but just as you said, I don't expect to achieve an anarchy or a libertarian society by having debates with all 350 million people in the United States, 8 billion people around the world. No. How I expect it to be achieved is to subvert the state's infrastructure in a way which makes the state impossible to continue existing.
Mm-hmm. Now, he's going to try to put words in my mouth as make an argument that, of course, I would never make because it's fucking retarded.
Yeah, Filthy Heretic's going to fire back and say that conservatism isn't real counterculture because anarchism is more effective.
What?
Yet,
I mean, I said in the comment that I would be embarrassed to make an argument like that because it's an absolute non sequitur. Conservatism is not a counterculture because anarchism is more persuasive. One does not relate to the other.
Conservatism isn't a counterculture because it's literally promoted as something which the state wants you to believe in and wants you to internalize your interests around.
It's very much a reinforcement of mainstream cultural narratives. The fact of the matter is, like, a plurality of Americans do identify with it. So to say that it's some kind of that it's somehow subversive or some countercultural to what is mainstream in the United States, is it different than what is portrayed in the mainstream media? Sure, but both the mainstream media and conservatives agree on multiple fundamental premises, namely the supremacy of the state. The supremacy of the divine overlords who preside over the state, the divinity of the state itself, and its absolute dominance as a cultural fact in our lives. So, no, they're not really countercultural whatsoever. Their differences are, quite frankly, marginal. The best you could say about conservatism is that it's a subculture, which, if you're going to be talking about like tailgating, furries, hillbillies, that sort of thing, you could make the argument that it's a subculture, but no, not really. I mean, should we just keep going?
I guess.
All right.
yes, it's more effective, but it doesn't mean it's still not effective. It doesn't stop being effective because something's more effective. It's still a counterculture. It may not.
I'm sorry to pause here, but effective. What does he mean by effective? I'm assuming he means in terms of being able to.
Because, like I told you in the beginning, from his perspective, his idea of libertarianism is that libertarianism is aiming to achieve anything which the person who is advocating for it sees as being aiming to shrink the government. Which, I mean, that's, if you say it like that, you know, the problem with that is revealed almost immediately. For one thing, it's entirely based on relative preference and how one sees information as opposed to actually having any sort of cohesive truth claim against the state. If we are going to look at an anti-authoritarian a rebuttal. It doesn't create a rebuttal to authoritarianism. It doesn't create a rebuttal to political rule. It doesn't even characterize what political rule is. It's just saying, I want to sit at home and drink Mountain Dew and play Call of Duty. So that means I'm against the state because I see that the state as being an obstacle to that goal. And the problem with that is it doesn't make a necessary case for anything. You can make that exact same argument in favor of any ends. And then we get to the second problem of how exactly do you define shrinking the state? Or
Yeah, we've already gone into that.
Well, what exactly about the state being smaller would make it less authoritarian? Because I don't know about you, but I'd say quite a few, like the Kingdom of Pomerania, for instance, had lower effective tax rates than the US government currently has. If anything, having a less domestically expansive state, historically we've seen, and as an incentive for the state, only serves as an incentive to expand its influence internationally upon other nations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, I mean, that's not even really the state being less expansive. It's just the state investing more of its resources into imperialism as opposed to domestic interference.
All right.
Not be the best counterculture, but it's still a counterculture. You dig? It's like saying that, yeah, hand sanitizer might be more effective at killing germs, and it might be quicker at killing germs. Like anarchism is quicker and better at killing liberalism. But hot, soapy water still kills germs, right? Just like conservatism still kills liberalism and socialism and communism.
Wrecking
and
the
leftism.
liberals with nationalist socialism.
I mean, it's kind of funny. Like I've always gotten the sense that this was his metric of success, whether or not you own the libs. I mean, wasn't it in his? I remember one time he was in our Discord channel, and he was actually unironically defending Trump on the basis that he owns the libs.
Whether or not you own the libs is the only metric for determining success.
Boy, where we're going, there won't be any more libs.
Remember when you said this?
The point is that mainstream culture and the powers that be are usually quite antagonistic to the counterculture.
Everybody knows that leftists in the mainstream media demonize conservatism at every single corner. They call them sexist, racist, homophobic, xenophobic, ableist, you name it. They call them deplorables. Hey,
we addressed this earlier. While yes, mainstream culture does demonize cultures that they don't like, it is by no means exclusive to countercultures, and what defines a counterculture is significantly larger than just the mainstream media disliking them. They have a set of cultural norms that are different than and oftentimes oppositional to the mainstream culture, which conservatism does not have.
Also, what isn't like just about what didn't you make that exact point in the video, but he clipped past it? Like it's not something we said here, but he just didn't address it in this video.
Yes, and it was in the first half of the video when I was defining my terms. And I also said it again when he did clip past that point, actually, when I was addressing Paul Joseph Stalin's point about conservatism being the new counterculture, that conservatism just reinforces mainstream cultural norms. He completely ignored that, which is why in my comment I asked multiple times if he actually watched this video, because I'm not sure he did.
Also, as I pointed out just a second ago, occasionally as a strategy for combating countercultural movements, the state will try to affiliate politically safe movements with a movement, with the principles and praxis of a movement, which is actually against the state's interests. Not only that, but quite, in the case of conservatism, well, conservatism is an example of this, but something the state will also do is they'll advertise politically safe movements as being anti-establishment, whatever that means.
And
Against
considering how mainstream Trump is, to the point where he had a TV show on a mainstream media network, I'll let you come to your own conclusions about how countercultural Trump truly is.
or
Call them Nazis.
how he was giving donations to the Clinton Foundation until as recently as 2014.
And he was openly bragging about it in his presidential campaign, so there's really no excuse. But anyways, I'm going to start playing again.
The current establishment loathes and hates conservatism, making it a huge counterculture. And so, yeah, they are the counterculture. As you said, they're attacked just like any counterculture in music is. So why isn't this a counterculture? They're being attacked by the mainstream media. They're being attacked by the people that hold the power right now, which is leftists. They're a counterculture by every way fathom today.
Oh crap! I messed up.
It was
but anyways,
like,
yeah.
I can find the point that we were at again. It was
it was like 5-4. It was like 5-14.
Yeah. But just as to what he was saying, what does that even mean? I mean, I heard what he said, but his concepts and what he's espousing right now, they're so vague. They can mean anything. And
I mean, it was.
What does he mean by power in the context of power? What's he talking about when he?
I think I can actually explain that. How far have you gotten into Sovereign Individual?
I've gotten, I'd say, 20 pages in.
Well, I'm finished. I'm starting up chapter 3. At the end of chapter 2, he starts talking about how in the Middle Ages that people didn't really understand cause and effect, and that when people were trying to speak, they spoke in terms of symbols, in terms of ideas, in terms of like vague concepts. And he gives this example of a diary entry describing like a mass murder in Barcelona, and it just refers to a bunch of emotions, feelings, and just concepts. And you can only vaguely tell that something really bad happened because it's like anger and vengeance and vituperation swept the streets. And that's how it was basically described. And the point that they made there is that this entire thought process to perceive the world in symbols and concepts ultimately short circuits logical cause and effect reasoning, which is what I think is happening here. I don't think Dapperton is being dishonest. I think he's just using a, for lack of a better term, liberal thought process that fundamentally perceives the world in symbols and concepts rather than cause and effect.
Well, I understand that, but just what I was trying to point out is that these descriptions he's providing are so broad they almost don't even mean anything. It's like he might as well just say they're spooky or the bad man.
Considering that leftism has no clear definition, is entirely an anti-concept, yeah, that's absolutely correct. Now let's continue.
They call them deplorables. They even call them Nazis. The current establishment loathes and hates conservatism, making it a huge counterculture. And so, yeah, they are the counterculture. As you said, they're attacked just like any counterculture in music is. So why isn't this a counterculture? They're being attacked by the mainstream media.
Also,
they're being attacked by the people that hold the power now, which is.
I just wanted to point out, I noticed something very interesting, which is that he seems to be kind of doing what Marxists do in using revealed preference and stated preference interchangeably. Like, for instance, he describes how a person or a group feels towards something in a way which implies both meanings simultaneously. That it's functionally what it is, but also what they claim that their actions or their praxis works towards. Like, he says that this group hates that, for example. The problem with that, though, is of course that revealed preference and stated preference are at odds with one another. And if means are not a reflection of ends, then there's no reason for that to be taken for an argument which argues that those ends are a reflection of those means should be taken seriously.
All
So
right.
the point that I'm making, though, is that he is using this very vaguely as a way probably to worm around trying to have his argument pinned down.
And I like this comment that Riley just gave me.
Good God.
Imagine
Comments.
shilling for imagine being an anarchist and shilling for conservatives. Anyways, let's keep
That's a
going.
good way to put it. Scrolling.
They're a counterculture by every way fathomable and by every definition. Just because you like something that's more effective doesn't mean the other thing isn't effective also. That's all I'm saying.
You repeated this several times.
Culture. I realized I was thinking about it all wrong in regards to what a counterculture would look like today. I assumed any underground movement would consolidate around a new music genre. Not so. The counterculture is the torrenters, the media sharers, the illegal downloaders, and copyright violators. When rebellion against authority means having virtually unlimited and unrestricted access to the songs its individual participants want to listen to, why would they have a single genre? The soundtrack of today's underground is every song ever recorded.
Every counterculture has usually a political ideology as its backbone. Even
I'm still trying to figure out what the political backbone of jazz is. What's the political backbone of rock and roll?
I don't know, but I can tell you what we're supposed to think of them as being associated with, and that's sort of whatever the person listening to it thinks of it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, somebody in the chat just tried to claim Bitcoin transactions are public and you can see the public ledger. I don't know how many times this argument's been debunked, but no, I mean there's a public ledger, sure, but the amount that was traded and the wallet addresses who traded it is useless information in terms of what it gives the state for tracking down transactions.
I mean, don't you know that the state can determine your identity specifically by the random arrangement of numbers in your address?
In order for that to mean anything, they would need to know a whole bunch of information, like who the wallet belongs to, or where they were, in order for them to do anything with that information. I just felt like saying that because it looks like based on the chat that apparently somebody from like either Dapperton or Hoppler's server gave a link in there. So in other words, the short bus that showed up.
I figured that they showed up from the very beginning. Anyways, let's keep going.
Well, I expected that, but something you'll see them throw around a lot is you'll make the argument. You'll see them make the argument, the meme controlled opposition argument that Bitcoin's not as secure as you think it is. It has a public ledger. Duh. So I'm really sick of seeing that. So I felt like I'd address that while they're all here.
All right, let's keep going.
For example, punk had anarchism. Psychedelic rock had the hippie, and the hippies believed in leftism and peace and no.
It's funny.
He has no idea. He has no idea what he's talking about. I think that's all we need to say here.
Well, I also wanted to point out how the sort of the hippie or the quote unquote new left movement that I think is referring to because that's what most people are referring to when they refer to quote unquote hippies, actually had a pretty strong libertarian streak to them. That's why actually they were so strongly demonized and why the police cracked down on a lot of their movements, because they had people like Karl Hess and Robert Lefebvre operating within them, encouraging those people to organize in subversive models, which were harming the state politically and were harming their ability to consistently fund themselves.
All right.
The war and all that. Try to tell me what torturers believe in. You try to tell me they believe in agorism? No, they don't.
I never said that. I never said that they believe in agorism. Now, some of them, I know that the people in our audience who are definitely torrenting, who are definitely doing that, do believe in anarchism and do believe in agorism, but the overwhelming majority of torrenters, no, of course not. And I said as much in the video that you didn't watch.
Yeah, I don't know how much more clear we, Konkin, or any agorist could be, but the point, the main selling point for agorism or counter-economic strategies for libertarian ends are that you don't have to be an ideological libertarian in order to derive profit for them. And these structures which are created through counter-economic means, this infrastructure incentivizes people to associate profit with associations that incentivize people to respect the NAP, or incentivize people to disassociate and trade around the state to deprive the state of revenue.
All right.
I don't even know what agorism is. I'll tell you what torturers believe in. They believe in free music.
Who gives
They
a
believe in
fuck
free
what they
movies
believe
and
in?
free TV.
They believe in free music. Good. I want them to believe in free music. That's all I'm asking.
What they believe in ideologically or politically is irrelevant. In fact, what they believe in politically, that's, it can tell us something about their interests. Certain political affiliations are associated with material preferences. That's what they're created for. But I think that the point is completely missed here.
Well, I mean, here's the point. And if you look up into the sky, I mean, it's nighttime, so you can probably see the stars. You might be able to see the point shooting over Dapperton's head right now.
Shows. They believe in free stuff. That doesn't mean that they're the new agorists. They don't believe in agorism. In fact, most of them go out and vote for more government. So don't tell me that they believe in agorism and that they fight for agorism. That's a bunch of bullshit.
That's all I said.
Agorism, and you would like it to be the new counterculture, so you're pretending that it is. You live in the land of imagination.
Imagination.
What do you think happens when a whole generation of people who grew up on media they acquired illegally come of age? Will they continue to enforce ideas of idea monopolization they helped make unenforceable? Of course, they acquired the industrial model of exchange simply doesn't work anymore.
Okay, listen up. Pirating movies, video games, and music doesn't make agorists, and it definitely doesn't make libertarians. Also, not everybody does it. Most people have a Hulu account, a Netflix account, or at least a Disney Plus account. They usually have one of the three. Hell, some people even have Amazon Prime, which is pretty good too. But to pretend that everybody pirates movies nowadays, that's not true. I don't.
I mean, it's good to hear that Dapperton has admitted to feeding the mouse. But But obviously, I never said that everyone is downloading movies, TV shows, and stuff. I simply said that the way that things are set up now, that people are incentivized to do that because it's cheaper, because you don't have to pay for a subscription. And more importantly, there's none of these ridiculous restrictions where you can't get, say, The Mandalorian on an Amazon Prime account. You can basically just get what you want to watch when you want to watch it. It's as good as a streaming service, but free. Both free in the sense that it doesn't cost anything to the consumer, and free that you can just grab what you want without any of these ridiculous licensing restrictions.
Imagine fucking what'll happen when people start releasing services like Steam or like one of these streaming platforms where anybody can upload any content that they want.
Oh man, you will just see an absolute renaissance of content. It'll be amazing.
And no, I'm not talking about YouTube. Before anybody says that, I'm referring to people just posting like TV shows that they've archived, and it's decentralized, so people could upload their own content.
It'll be beautiful.
The days of companies like Disney are behind us, and their continued existence is a timescale measured in weeks rather than decades.
Disney's going to last weeks. No, it's not. Disney owns so many assets, it's going to last forever. It's going to last your lifetime. That's
Oh
for
my
damn
God.
sure.
Oh, that's so wrong. I don't even know where to start.
I mean, I'll try to say that Disney's business model largely, not largely, almost entirely relies on the existence of copyright and just general idea monopolization legislation, which, as I pointed out in this video, is no longer enforceable. And we are continually moving towards a point at which copyright and idea monopolization is simply not going to be possible. So when I said that Disney's existence is a time measured in weeks, it could be a few weeks, it could be dozens of weeks, it could be many, even hundreds of weeks, but it's still measured in weeks. The point is that their business model relies entirely on a system that is simply no longer going to be profitable. I mean, they're already bleeding money from a lot of their IPs. I mean, the Star Wars IP is absolutely bleeding money. And even before the COVID-19 madness, and by we, I mean me and Esso, actually did a story about how Disneyland theme parks need to do all sorts of accounting tricks to make their revenue seem significantly larger than it actually is. For example, if you were to buy someone a $100 gift card and then they spend that $100 gift card on, I don't know, potatoes, Disneyland would count that as $200 worth of revenue, even though they only earned $100.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. There are three main problems that I've sort of identified with what Dapperton's saying. First is the fact that, yes, it's not just Disney. Disney is a big offender, but 97% of all S&P 500 registered corporations don't use GAAP standards of accounting, GAAP, generally accepted procedures. But just what I was going to point out though is that revenue is a GAAP standard of accounting. So they're so disconnected from how much money they're actually making that they don't even use revenue on their accounting figures. I mean, and then on top of that, they pull all these tricks like the one that Filthy just mentioned. So that's one problem with it. The second problem, of course, is that Disney's entire profit model is based on intellectual property, and intellectual property is increasingly becoming impossible to enforce. So there's one issue. Then the other...
People are going to start publishing Marvel comics, and it's not going to be Disney licensed.
Well, the third problem and the final one is the economic calculation problem applied to private firms. His argument here assumes that as a firm obtains more resources, then it becomes more profitable. But that's actually not true. You run into a form of diseconomy of scale once you obtain a certain amount of assets, because it becomes more difficult to manage them all internally due to needing to create an impenetrable level of management bureaucracy, which just internalizes information and then does nothing with it or misuses assets in response, but also because that makes their internal decisions increasingly disassociated from market prices. So it becomes more difficult for them to use information as they scale upwards, even if we were to assume that all the internal bureaucrats were the most efficient, more efficient, even if we were to assume that they're more efficient than what a human could do. Let's just say they're all computers. Well, if they were all computers, this problem would still exist.
Mhm.
But then there's
we should keep going. We're running out of time.
just one last thing is that I wanted to say is just that it's just objectively Disney is. I don't know how you could say they're prospering. I mean, just this week they laid off 43,000 employees. So
Yeah, they're screwed.
But let's keep going.
Not weeks, but yes, Disney's in some financial trouble, but it's because it bought out Lucasfilms and delivered us some turds. Also, the coronavirus has got the parks closed, which is hurting them financially as well.
We addressed this.
Go out of business when they own more assets than they ever have. It's frankly ridiculous.
We're entering a new age, the imagination age.
Wow! The land of make-believe!
The coronavirus madness is accelerating this process, forcing businesses to adopt work-from-home models and shutting down barbaric Prussian model indoctrination centers in favor of asymmetric online learning models. At the time of this recording, I predict the lockdowns will go on for a few more months yet. Plenty of time for this way of doing business to become the new normal. Who's going to want to go back to dressing up in hot, stuffy suits and sit in traffic jams for 2 hours a day just to go to work, when they can just pull up a chair and go to work at home?
That's not the truth. The truth is, a lot of people didn't get new jobs, and they're not okay. They're in fact jobless, and they're collecting unemployment right now until they get a new job, or until their job is restored. And even if they did get a new job and their job,
People still have jobs. The point is for the people who still have jobs that are now required to work from home because of these stupid quarantines and lockdowns, that working from home for those people is going to become the new normal. And that this is going to have major socio-political ramifications beyond just simply them not going to work anymore.
Yeah, even before the COVID-19 breakout started happening, you can go back to around summer of last year. There were states such as California and Illinois starting to create bills to crack down on people working at home because there were so many jobs it was starting to be more efficient to do that the white market firms the state was propping up were having a hard time continuing to sustain themselves.
And it's funny, he clips out the point right after I said what I said, where I mentioned that it's more profitable for them to do so because, one, they're not spending money on gas, and two, they're not wasting money and time in traffic jams. So yeah, people are going to do this not because they're ideological agorists, but because it's just more profitable. And I didn't say this in the video, but I do strongly believe that in order to keep their transactions, their meetings, all their other stuff private, they're going to want to move towards peer-to-peer encryption. So yeah, all I said was that the coronavirus is simply accelerating the process of the transition into what I call the imagination age. And yes, I'm going to stick by that term because the new economy is going to value ideas, what's in your head, more so than it's going to value what was previously valued in the past.
And just one thing that I was going to add is he seems to be under the impression that we're arguing that jobs aren't going to exist, or that we're against jobs, that we're arguing that there's a problem with jobs. And
that sounds like something that Hoplu would argue against us with.
And no, neither of us have said that. If you want to know specifically what I think Filthy's perspective is, specifically what we're claiming is that it's more efficient to trade in peer-to-peer networks and through self-employed production. And those are also incredibly subversive models of communication and trade, which will make it impossible for the financial institutions which the state requires to sustain itself on a systemic level. It makes them impossible to continue functioning consistently. So,
Yeah.
Job is from home. It doesn't mean that they're agorists now. It doesn't mean they're libertarians now. I don't even get your logic, to be honest. I mean,
You don't understand what I believe.
you're acting as if outside jobs are status and inside jobs are libertarian.
what?
Especially,
I don't even know what that means. I'm not even going to address it.
we can save money on gas for goodness sake. And what poor hatchling is excited to go back to government schooling? Sure, the effort will be put into returning society to its pre-corona arrangements, but that world is gone and it's not coming back.
So you honestly think public schools, government schools are done with, and homeschooling is going to be the new way of life? That is freaking ridiculous.
That's the exact
People can't wait for the
That's the exact fucking opposite of what you just said. There will be effort taken to try and sustain the old world statist institutions, but ultimately that's not going to work because it's better. It's just better to do things the libertarian way with a libertarian praxis.
What's going to end up happening is that hatchlings are going to realize, hey, I enjoy being home and being with my parents more. I enjoy not having these pointless arguments about stupid grades or having run in the hall or getting in trouble with my parents because I ran in the hallways or did some other thing some asshole government agent said was wrong and evil and bad. I enjoy actually learning from home, doing these things, doing online learning and that stuff. While parents are going to say like, hey, wait a minute, my kids are actually more well behaved now that they're no longer basically in a charnel house exposed to the predations of the worst and most nasty bullies in our government schools who are largely encouraged because of the ridiculous policies of said government schools. It's weird.
Or being fucking hooked on drugs because I was slightly defiant one time in class. Paraphrasing.
Gee, I wonder how many people have had that experience.
The kids to get back to school. They're clamoring for more state right now. They're not clamoring for less because there's a bump in the road. When there's a bump in the road,
I think we can actually end this here because he's basically going to go on about how people are going to be clamoring for more government and more state.
Well, that's the point that he was making sort of throughout the video, and the point that we've made, I don't know for how long now. It's kind of hard to even respond to it because he hides his arguments behind these levels of qualifiers and these sort of abstract arguments that don't really have any cohesive meaning, these terms. It's hard to respond, but that seems to be the impression that he has, is that in order to be libertarian, you have to understand libertarian philosophy, and you have to own the libs, own the statists with facts and libertarianism. That's absolutely not what we're arguing. That's not a point that we've ever made, I don't think.
No, and it said in The Sovereign Individual, they very much point this out, that people adopt the new model of organization, of economic organization, before there is even a coherent ideological framework that explains what's happening and becomes mainstream. We have a coherent argument and a coherent philosophy that explains all of it. Obviously, it's not mainstream yet, but guess what? It doesn't need to become mainstream. All we need is that people just operate along a basis that we are clearly observing is more profitable. It's not a question of agorism versus conservatism versus liberalism versus all of this. It's just a question of economic efficiency and economic organization. I mean, in my comment in this video, the last line I say, and I think this is actually very, very fitting, is whether or not we have a free society or not will not be up for a vote.
And that's a great way of putting it, because fundamentally the way you achieve a free society is through anti-politics and through escaping the system, not genuflecting, getting on your knees, and licking the people who wear the boots of the system's boots clean.
Mm-hmm. I mean, people didn't vote away the Roman Empire. People just began to associate in ways that the Roman Empire didn't like because fundamentally they were powerless to stop it. I mean, people didn't vote away the power of the Catholic Church at the end of the medieval age, around the end of the 15th century. What ended up happening is that there was a whole lot of subversive technology that made their monopolies on control and power and politics just untenable.
Same thing happened with the Soviet Union. Now, there's a lot of propaganda in our current society that was caused by the military or whatever. But no, I mean, if you look at a lot of what the Soviet government was doing in the last decade of its existence, it was diverting like 90% of its resources to fighting against counter-economists, because counter-economists were organizing around the political economy. Around by around I mean like getting around it, like an obstacle, not within it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like 4 times the marginal GDP in the Soviet Union, which was produced through gray market trade in the last decade of its existence. So you cannot tell me that was at the very least not a major contributing factor.
Mm-hmm. Now we're running towards the end of the video, so let's go ahead and talk about the fun stuff. The second video he made in reply to my comment. He made a video in reply to a video comment I made, which I find it's absolutely hilarious. And the fact of the matter is, like, I made 11 points in that comment, listed by number, as well as a conclusion. He only replied to my first point about his video title and my conclusion, which I found to be absolutely hilarious, which implies that he agrees with 9, or rather 10 of the 11 points that I made. I mean, I don't know about the second one, because the second one I just pointed out that, yeah, sometimes I hiss. I can't help that.
I didn't even really read your back and forth, because I was just looking through his comments and I saw most of the people were either trolling him or shitting on him, and I was just like, oh, whatever. But then you approached me with the video and were like, we should do a response to it, and I'm like, okay. I've been tempted to do it for a while, but this seems like a great opportunity.
Yeah, and I also like to read off some of the comments that he's made. This is in reply to the second video, where he hilariously outs me as a liar, even though he failed to point out at any point where he didn't even say where I lied or where I allegedly lied. He just says that I'm a liar and gives no evidence for this whatsoever. Let me see here. So I'm trying to find one of the comments where he just goes crazy. Yeah, here we go. Spacepan says, drama channel. Mr. Dapperton says, then unsub if you don't like it. I don't owe you content you want to watch. I make content I want to make.
That seems,
That's
oddly insecure for just a sort of one-off comment like that.
Your channel has gotten so petty and lame. Unsubbed by Adam No Eve. Good. Don't let the door hit your ass on the way out.
Again, rather insecure there. When I get a comment like that, most of the time I just ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, every once in a while somebody who doesn't like a video will come along, and that's to be expected. But apparently for Dapperton, it's the end of the world, he's got to stop everything and write a fucking paragraph long butthurt reply.
And I don't know what his deal is. I mean, I'm absolutely certain that he is insecure, but
I just thought you were gonna just read your back and forth, because apparently that comment thread was good enough to make a whole new video in response to it.
there wasn't even a back and forth. I just read a comment and then just forgot about it. I mean, I posted a screenshot in the back alley, but beyond that, like, I didn't really engage him. He made a reply. I didn't really read it because I don't really care enough. But apparently he only wanted to reply to my first point about the title of his video being misleading, and my conclusion, which, I mean, I still don't know where I lied. I still don't know any points in that video where I used the term agorism. I'm not even sure I used the term anarchism. I definitely used libertarianism. I know that for certain, but
As in
yeah.
the philosophical principles of libertarianism.
Yeah, and in fact, my video wasn't even meant to be terribly political. Yeah, I did make a couple points about how cockroaches are terrible, but beyond that, like,
Well,
it's just a point.
I touched upon this at the beginning, and that's why I was wondering whether or not you were going to talk about your comment underneath the thread. Is it just this just seems like such like unbelievably petty drama baiting? Like, you made a video which was completely uncontroversial. He made a response. He replied to it, and apparently your comment under that video was enough for him to spark a reply. It seems as though he was just trying to get you to reply so that he could make a video like that. And that
Probably.
that seems to be the motivation behind even the original what we were responding to today, which, you know, I've you know, I'm happy to respond, but, you know, does he genuinely believe this, or
I mean, I know he's told me specifically, so this isn't controversial at all. I'm not making an allegation here that he doesn't read anarchist literature. The conclusion I derive from this is that he simply is not a principled anarchist. It's simply, as you said earlier, he wants to play Call of Duty while drinking Mountain Dew, and he perceives that the state is an impediment to that, which ordinarily would be fine. But the problem is that he's so insecure about it that, well, it's both obnoxious and amusing.
well, it's not just that, but he's deliberately, I don't know if it's deliberate or not, but he's skewing the sort of philosophical underworking of libertarianism. And yeah, I remember I was in the group chat with you on Twitter, I think, back when that group chat was a thing, where I saw him say that to you. I don't know if you have it screenshotted or not, but I just am going to corroborate that because I was there. And I mean, after reading people like Konkin or E.C. Regal or some of the older works of Rothbard, Herbert Spencer, Spooner, Benjamin Tucker, I could definitely tell you he certainly doesn't understand why philosophical principles are important, let alone the actual defined philosophy of libertarianism. Otherwise, the idea that libertarianism is just when you want less government, that's something which has been refuted by countless libertarians in countless different ways. Libertarianism is not a reduction of the state, whatever that means. Libertarianism, best understood, is a rebuttal of politics. It is a refutation of the concept of political rule and political association.
Now, Dapperton is a perfect cautionary tale in terms of why, as a libertarian, you need principles. Because the moment you abandon principles, you get crap like Dapperton, who surrounds himself entirely by or with unprincipled people. All the principled people have abandoned his content, his channels, and all of his stuff a long time ago. And you end up with crap like what's he been saying on his Twitter now, that we need the government to do things that capitalism can't. You know, exactly the same thing that social democrats argue.
Let
I
me
mean, I have
read,
no.
let me read the tweet verbatim. Hold on a
Sure.
second here. Government serves a vital role in keeping people home and safe from coronavirus. And this is something he actually said. I do think the disabled should be helped by government as well. Government should only be used in emergencies like that because without capitalism, what he refers to as free market associations, running the economy, government ran up a $2 trillion tab in 3 weeks.
I have no trouble, I'm not hesitant at all to say that Dapperton is not an anarchist. I don't even know if he's a libertarian. I wouldn't say he's full Hoppian, because at least Hoppians have an understanding of an idea, of a philosophy that's at least internally coherent. This guy is just not smart enough to be a Hoppian.
Somebody called me a mutualist in the chat. Well, it's Chaser. Basically.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, I mean, I have no trouble calling Dapperton not a libertarian, not a Volnost. I'm pretty sure Volnost. I'm pretty sure you're smart enough to be a Hoppian. I'm not. I actually don't know enough about you to make that judgment one way or another, but I'm perfectly willing to give you that benefit of the doubt. But with that said, yeah, we should probably start wrapping this up. Any closing thoughts?
Well, I just wanted to say that I was planning on actually starting a series today, which we're going to start recording bi-weekly, where we just respond to dumb takes on Twitter or other platforms, and it's not something that we record in the style like this or our essays. It's just, you know, kind of like Suit House or whatever, just shooting the shit. But closing thoughts. I would say that this is the result of a downward spiral like most people don't ever see, or like is not usually seen. But in reality, I've gone back and I've watched a lot of I've watched a lot of Dapperton's earlier videos, and he certainly had less of the liberal get owned XDDD mentality. But I think that to some extent, in hindsight, I would recommend going back and watching a lot of his older videos. Like a lot of his arguments for libertarianism, like they were always like this. He always seems to have not really understood philosophical libertarianism, or was never really skeptical of the state. He just, his views were simply like they were conservative views, like politically conservative views. I mean, pro-political, so not really skeptical of political rule. His conclusion was always just, oh well, I don't like the state getting in the way of me and my chicken tendies. But so would I say that this is a fall from grace in terms of how he's acting and how he's treating people? Certainly. But politically, I think this is just sort of the logical conclusion of the principles and the conception of the world that he's always had. And we're just getting to this point now because he, you know, is basing his entire channel on drama content at this point.
Mm-hmm. And really, I only the only way to sum up my final thoughts are 3 words that most of you are probably not going to want to hear, but I think are very appropriate nowadays. Fade to dust.
Oof. That's pretty heavy. That's pretty spicy.
Yeah, but it's true. But anyways, yeah. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
All right. See ya.